Hey, are you a high achiever who struggles with perfectionism? Do you get stuck in the cycle of overthinking? Do you do everything for everyone else because you think otherwise it won't get done? Do you feel like you should come with a disclaimer? Hi, I'm anxious. Hey, I'm Katy. Full disclosure, I'm not a therapist, doctor, or mental health professional. I'm just a career mama who also struggles with anxiety. For me, anxiety reared its head at the most inconvenient times, when I wanted to be present with my family, at those high pressure business meetings, when I was laying in bed awake at night worrying instead of sleeping. I just wanted to relax and be able to have fun, and I know that you do too. What if you found tools to manage your anxiety? What if you knew how to enjoy life even though you are anxious? Look, it's time to put down that third cup of coffee and swap it for some lemon water. We're going to get control over anxiety so it can stop controlling you. Let's go, girl. Hey, sweet anxious high achiever. Welcome to the High and Anxious podcast. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. The sun is shining. I've gotten a little bit of time to myself this morning, which is so precious when you're a busy working parent. You know what that's like. And I now get to spend a little bit of time with you through the mic, through your headphones, through whatever means you're listening. And I'm just so glad that you're joining me, especially today, because this topic I'm just so passionate about personally, professionally, you name it. And it has to do around the topic of asking for help, because I think that people who are high achievers and are capable of doing things themselves tend to not be great at asking for help or tend to avoid it. And people who struggle with anxiety, for sure, I think that asking for help is something that's really hard to do. And I've noticed a couple of times recently how people will share with me stories about how they avoided asking for help or they finally asked for help and how this went for them. And I think about how many times in my own life and in the lives of people around me, how this has been a theme that has come up, that for one reason or another, people need help and they just don't or won't ask for it, or they hold off until they're just in absolute misery. And I wanted to talk today about 3 reasons why I think that that happens, and then let's talk about some ways that we can get around or through that sweet anxious high achiever, because asking for help is just so incredibly critical to our own sense of self, our mental well-being, our success in the world, and to teaching others around us too that it's okay to ask for help. Because I want you to think about how many times you've been asked for help and how the vast majority of the time you're pleased to help with whatever it is that people are asking you for, which is contrary to some of the reasons that might be driving you to not ask. So let's get into those. I thought of kind of 3 main categories of reasons why people might not ask for help. And one of them is just simply they don't want to be a burden to others. They think, oh, that person's so busy too. They've got a lot on their plate. I already asked them for help last week. I don't want to bother them. Why would I reach out to them and ask for them for help? They've got a lot going on. They're a busy person. I'm just not going to ask. So I think that we'll avoid it just because we don't want to be a burden to other people if we want to ask for help or feel like we need some help. And a second reason I think can just be simply vulnerability. And this can go, I think, in one of 2 ways. So we might feel like we should already know how to do what we're doing, or know the answer to the question that we want to ask, or be able to figure out how to get what we need on our own without bothering somebody else. And so I think there's a little bit of vulnerability there. And I think it can go the other way too, in that sometimes your ego might get in the way. Like, gosh, I have been doing XYZ thing for how many years, and shouldn't I already know the answer to this? And I don't want to show somebody that I don't know the answer. I don't want them to deem me to be incompetent. I don't want them to think ill of me. I don't want it to cause problems in our relationship. I don't want them to not trust me. So I think that also this fear of vulnerability can get in the way of us asking for help in making ourselves vulnerable. And then the third reason I think that we might avoid asking for help are just simply making assumptions about other people too. Like, why would they help little old me? They're a big dog. They're the boss. They're the expert in this field. They're whatever excuse you want to make up for yourself about this person and why they might not want to help you or make time for you. And so I think that assumptions can sometimes get in the way of us even bothering to ask. So again, those three things I mentioned are maybe we don't ask because we don't want to be a burden. We fear the vulnerability in asking, feeling like maybe we should already be able to help ourselves know the answer, etc. And what might come of that if we show the other person that we don't or can't or are asking for help. And third, just assumptions about the other person and perhaps their willingness to respond to your request for help. And then I also want to talk about this additional thing. Maybe I'll call this like a bonus reason, if you will. And this is the beating up of ourselves that we do when we feel like we need to ask for help, or we don't ask for help, or we wait to ask until it's just we're past the point of needing it and we're in misery, and it's past the point where maybe someone can actually help you because you waited for so long, and then you want to beat yourself up over it. So I would encourage you, sweet anxious high achiever, to notice if beating yourself up over needing to ask for help, asking for help, not asking for help well, or even asking for help and getting a no and then beating yourself up like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. How could I have bothered them? Why would I ever think to do that? Notice where you're doing that, because that is just not at all helpful to us in any way, shape, or form, sweet anxious high achiever. So I want you to think about these ways in your life where you may be holding back from asking for help and what might serve you better instead. And I want to share an example from one of my mentors recently shared a story where she's got a family with young kids, and she was growing resentful over the fact that she was kind of the primary laundry doer in their house from start to finish, from washing to drying to folding to putting away. And she didn't mind the first couple of steps, but the folding and putting away part just was doing her in. She would get hung up there. It wasn't her favorite part. And she was getting really frustrated. And finally, she let this out to her partner. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Done. I'll just add that to the weekly checklist, and me and the kids will help you. And from then on, it wasn't a problem. And they started folding and putting away their own laundry. And she was like, why did I wait so long to ask for help? If that's all it took was a simple ask for this pain point for me to go away, this thing that was driving this wedge of frustration in between her and her family to just disappear, why did she wait so long? So I bet you anything that you could think of an example of something like that in your life where you hesitated to ask, waited to ask, etc. Then you made an ask and thought, oh, that went really well for me. I want you to think of a time where that happened for you, sweet anxious high achiever. And then I want you to celebrate that and maybe even sit down and journal it out so that you can cement that feeling and that learning into your brain and being, so that in future you'll be more likely to ask for help when you need it. Because you, sweet anxious high achiever, as capable as you are, do not need to do everything alone. And there is power in collaboration. There's power in asking for help. There's power in accepting and receiving help. And you are so worth it, my dear sweet friend. That's all I have for you today, sweet anxious high achiever. If you haven't yet joined my free Facebook group, the link to join is in the show notes. It's a community of incredible, wonderful, amazing, high-achieving women just like you. We're there for a little bit of support, encouragement, and fun. I'm in there throughout the week. I'd love to meet you and get to know you a little bit and support you on your journey through your high-achievingness and struggling with anxiety. I just would love to have you there. So again, the link to join is in the show notes. That's all I have for you today, sweet anxious high achiever. I can't wait to talk with you next week. Hey friend, thanks for being here. Did today's episode help you feel more in control of your anxiety? Did it inspire you to rest or relax? Or maybe it challenged you to really look at why anxiety is a part of your life? If so, I'd love to hear from you. If you would take 30 seconds, pause this episode, scroll down in Apple Podcasts, and leave me a review, I would be so grateful. See you next week. Disclaimer, I am not a medical professional, and this podcast is not providing therapy or medical treatment. contents of the podcast are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider with your health questions and concerns.